The red squirrel is one of Scotland's most iconic animals, and one of the very best places to see them is right here on the Southern Upland Way. The red squirrel is the only squirrel which is native to Scotland. They were once common throughout Britain, and even now they're very common in most of Europe and Asia. But in the UK, the only place where you'll see them is in Scotland, on some islands, and isolated remote places in the rest of the country. Red squirrel are incredibly well adapted to living in trees. Their small size and incredible agility allows them to climb right out onto the very narrowest of branches and leap across from one tree to another. They've got double jointed ankles which allows them to twist their paws round so that they can grip in with their claws to the bark of the tree, whichever way they're facing, and this allows them to run head first down the trunk of a tree at incredible speed. They'll live almost their entire life up in a tree, including building their nests in the trees. These are called drays, and they're normally built either in the crook of a branch or in a hole inside the tree. They're built of twigs, and they're used both for shelter and to raise their young, which are called kittens. Squirrels will often have more than one dray in case one gets damaged in bad weather, so they've always got a spare. Squirrels are famous for eating nuts, and the image of a red squirrel holding a hazelnut in its front paws is iconic, but actually their diet is quite varied and depends a lot on the time of year. In the autumn and winter, they will mostly eat nuts and seeds, and particularly with red squirrels, the seeds of pine cones. So when you're walking through coniferous woodland, it's worth keeping an eye on the ground and looking out for some squirrel pine cones. What the squirrel will do is it will find a pine cone to eat, it will take it to somewhere nice and safe, high off the ground with a good view around, and it will eat the pine cone, biting off the scales one at a time and eating the pine nut underneath. Then it will drop the remaining core on the ground, and gradually a pile of these squirrel pine cones will build up on the ground underneath. Squirrels will collect food when it's plentiful in the autumn and store it away, either in holes in trees or buried under the ground. In the winter, they don't hibernate, but they're much less active, spending most of their time hidden away in their drays trying to keep warm, and they'll survive by using up the supplies of food that they've stored. In the spring, when the stores are used up and there are no pine cones or nuts available, they will search for other sources of food. At this time of year, they'll eat flowers, shoots, buds and bulbs. Later on in the summer, they will also eat fruit when they can get it. But this really is the time of year when they've got the least food available. Squirrel numbers started to decline because of habitat loss, and this is still one of the biggest factors affecting the species. 4,000 years ago, almost the entire of Scotland was covered in broadleaf woodland. Today, the amount of continuous forest cover is much less, and a lot of what there is conifer plantation. A lot of people think that red squirrel prefer conifer to broadleaf woodland, and there is some truth in this, but it's worth remembering the only native cone-bearing tree in Scotland is the Scots pine, and even that was only ever up in the Highlands. Most squirrels in Britain lived entirely in broadleaf woodland. Also, pine cones will only provide food for half the year. The rest of the time they need to find something else to eat, so monoculture conifer plantation with nothing else growing nearby won't support a population of squirrel. The main reason why the red squirrels are beginning to die out is because of the introduction of the American grey squirrel. Although they're called grey squirrels, colour is not actually a very good way of telling them apart. You do get red squirrels with quite a lot of grey in their fur, and you get grey squirrels which really are quite red. Obviously red squirrels have the distinctive ear tufts, but again this isn't a great way of telling them apart because not all red squirrels have them. You get some that just don't have ear tufts at all. So how do you tell them apart? Well, the grey squirrel is a lot bigger and stockier than the red squirrel. But to me, the main way of telling them is how they move. The red squirrel bounces in a series of jumps, whereas the grey squirrel runs in a sort of scurrying motion. The grey squirrel was introduced into Britain in the late 19th century by wealthy landowners who introduced them deliberately into their estates. They then spread throughout Britain and mostly displaced the reds. This was partly due to competition. The greys are much bigger and breed faster than the reds, so in areas with scarce food resource, they just outcompete them. However, it's mostly because of the Squirrelpox virus. This is a virus that both red squirrels and grey squirrels can catch. The difference is that when a grey squirrel catches it, it's pretty much unaffected, whereas a red squirrel that catches it will almost certainly be dead within a few weeks. In areas where you've got both reds and greys living together, the greys will pass the virus on to the reds and they will very soon die out. There is, however, some hope. Recent studies from Ireland and Scotland have suggested that another native Scottish animal might provide some hope for the red squirrel. The pine marten is a rare mammal. It's related to weasels and otters. It's almost extinct in England and Wales, but populations are beginning to recover in Ireland and remote parts of Scotland. The studies suggest that in areas where you get both pine marten and grey squirrel living together, the grey squirrel numbers will decline. However, in areas where you get pine marten and red squirrel, the red squirrel population will be unaffected or could even rise. It's thought this is because the red squirrel has evolved alongside the pine marten, so it's well aware of the threat that they pose and is able to keep out of their way. The grey squirrel, on the other hand, has no idea of the dangers of these predators, so is easy for them to catch. There is a group in Dumfries and Galloway that are trying to support the pine marten, so hopefully we will be able to enjoy both of these amazing creatures for many years to come. Pine marten are very elusive, but I will try and get some footage of them, and if I do, I'll do another YouTube video about them. So make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss that one. Red squirrel are most active in the early morning or the late evening. They're also most likely to be seen in the spring when they've got young and are gathering food, or in the autumn when they're getting supplies ready for winter. There are lots of good places to see them in Dumfries and Galloway, including Escrig Nature Reserve near Lockerbie, which is on the Annandale Way, or the Red Squirrel Hide at the National Trust for Scotland's Three Gardens, which is where a lot of the footage for this video was taken. However, if you walk the Southern Upland Way, especially during the spring or the autumn, you'll almost certainly see one at some point on your adventure. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do click the like button below and make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more videos about the wildlife of southern Scotland. Thank you for watching.